Good morning everyone, and good afternoon to those of you in the eastern states, and welcome to the webinar on how to use your voice effectively when presenting. So by presenting I mean you may be doing public speaking, you may be running a seminar, you may be running a workshop, you may be facilitating. So how to use your voice to have greater impact as that speaker, that presenter, that facilitator. A little bit about myself. There's some new names that I don't think I've met before. So Peter Dew is my name, and I'm a public speaking trainer and coach. And I guess my purpose in life, my passion, is to help everybody and anybody to become more effective and more confident in their spoken words, so that people who've got messages they want to say, they've got something to contribute, have the ability to say it without fear and without concern, and not only just say it but also have impact, hence the effectiveness. One of my favourite quotes is from James Earl Jones, and James Earl Jones, the voice of Darth Vader, James Earl Jones, the #1 voiceover artist in United States commercial television, and so the right person to use for a webinar on voice. James Earl Jones said, "There's nothing harder than to have messages in your heart that you cannot share." In other words, there's nothing harder to have something you want to say, something to contribute, but you don't have the courage or the ability or the effectiveness or the confidence to put that message across. So that's my passion. Where that comes from is that I'm a person who stutters. Those of you who've been on my workshops will know that I come from a background of really struggling with public speaking. In fact, struggling with the spoken word full stop, and having that period in my life of when I was an elective mute, when I just chose not to speak and used pen and paper. And the consequences on my life, promotions, meeting people, social isolation were huge. And now that I've addressed some of those issues, I still stutter every day, but now that I've addressed those issues, I'd like to help other people have the confidence to stand up and speak. Please participate in the webinar. Ask questions as we go. Please take notes. Participate during the webinar and after. I'll leave you with my email and my website, and also apply some of the material that I say to your own situations, to your own work. Some of the tips, some of the information I give you, you might say, I could not use that. That's not applicable to my situation, and that's perfectly fine. So filter the information I provide you and think, how can I use that in my workplace, in my current situation? Will this be of benefit to me? And that way you take on board that which helps you and you discard that information that does not apply. I mentioned about questions earlier on, but there's been a few more people who've joined. 2 ways to ask questions. Raise your hand. You've got a little toolbar. Put your hand up and I'll open up your microphone. If you don't have a microphone, then please just type into the question box and I will see that question appear, and then I'll be able to answer it. There's a couple of times in the webinar where I'll stop and specifically wait for Q&A, for questions, but don't wait for that slide, don't wait for that position. When I say, are there any questions, please feel free to ask questions at any time as we go. Okay. The stuff I'm going to cover, as I said, not all of this will apply to your personal situation. What's the role of the speed and the pace at which you speak? And the importance of not speaking too fast. The importance of volume and the impact of softening your voice at some times in your seminar. How to use your voice to bring the audience back. So they're in a discussion mode or they're in a brainstorming session and you want to bring the audience back, and you've seen people click on wine glasses and clap their hands and all sorts of things, but you can use your voice to bring that audience back. How to create a voice that is credible. Sometimes you want to be a credible speaker. You want to give information that people believe in. Other times you want to be approachable, and approachability is more about two-way discussion as opposed to sending your message in that credible voice. When to be approachable and when to be credible. The power of the pause, how to be comfortable with pause, how to be comfortable with silence. And your filler words, the ums and ahs. How can you reduce the impact that they have on your presentation? That's what I want to cover in the agenda today, and also answer some of your questions relating to these topics or something else around voice. I think also with the webinar, I'd like to emphasize that not all of us have brilliant James Earl Jones voices, and I'm one of those. I've heard myself played back on radio and also on tape recording, and my voice is not all that brilliant. But what you can do is use some of these things, the volume, the pace, and the use of pause, to create vocal variety, to create interest in your voice. So if you're not blessed with that beautiful musical rise and fall voice, that doesn't mean you still can't do things that will have impact on your spoken word. Why do a webinar on the power of voice? Why talk about the importance of your voice in my public speaking workshops? You've seen this graph before. Your body language is so important, but your voice is around about a third of how people react and take to your message. So if you deliver the best message with a flat, monotone voice and with no gestures, then people are not going to buy your message, even if it is well scripted. So you need to put the emphasis in your voice. You need to have the passion, the intonation, the sincerity within your voice. That has impact on your overall message, how sticky it is, i.e. how much they remember it, and how much impact it has. So will they go away and do what you've said? Will they buy your persuasive argument? The voice contributes about a third of the impact in your overall presentation. That's why this webinar, and that's why I teach it in my public speaking workshops. So let's start. Change volume. So don't be afraid to change the volume of your voice. Really good way of emphasizing key points. Now, one of the rules for emphasizing your key points is to think of your normal volume. Are you a relatively loud speaker? You've got a good, booming, confident voice. You very rarely need to use a microphone unless it's a big, 100 person seminar. Or do you have a soft voice? Quite a soft, reasonably spoken voice that generally when you get in a bigger room, you need to mic up. So the rule is, when you go to those key messages, switch your volume to the opposite of what you're normally comfortable with. So if you are a loud speaker, don't be afraid to whisper some of that key points, some of those take-home points. It just has a stronger impact on the audience. Vice versa, if you are a soft speaker and you've got this nice soft voice and people are still hearing it because in a big room you're microphoned up, but you've still got good ability to project your voice even with a softer voice, don't be afraid to raise the volume on that key point, the two things that you want them to walk away with, and then drop back to your normal speaking volume. So just by changing the volume, you can increase the impact of those take-home messages. Welcome to those people who are just joining us at the moment. Another thing And I'm going to talk about how to bring the audience back later on. Another thing you can do, and it will help you bring the audience back, is to go loud with the first couple of words and then soften. So if everyone can now come back towards the center of the room, I want to move on to the next point. The very fact that people will have heard you, because the first words, the first sentence, part of the sentence is loud, and then you drop and whisper your voice, people will turn and look at you because all of a sudden they realize you're not shouting, you're not going to compete. And you can try this with your room. If you shout for people to come back and then you keep raising your voice, what you'll notice is the volume of the people that are interacting, speaking, brainstorming in the room will get louder and louder and louder as you raise your voice. But when you soften your voice, they'll want to know what's going on and they'll stop speaking and look back to you. So that's one of the ways you can bring the audience back. Start loud and then drop to a whisper. So your volume. And it adds to your vocal variety. If you speak in a monotone, mono-volume voice, then it can become a little bit boring. So that's the volume. The pace and the speed at which you talk. First of all, if you speak really fast, then you can use pause and a few tools to slow that down. And I've got the pause and silence a little bit later on. The important thing is the pace at which you speak can help emphasize points and can help demonstrate the energy that you're bringing to the room. I'm not sure if any of you remember those adverts for some of the industry super funds, and Bernie Fraser, who is the ex-treasurer, no, the ex-boss of the federal bank, the ex-governor of the Reserve Bank, and Bernie Fraser just speaks at the same speed in the entire presentation, and he always has done, and it's a very slow and deliberate presentation. He's very famous, so he's got celebrity status and he gets away with it and he's recognized for that slow voice, but generally that slow speed would risk putting some of the audience to sleep. Now, when I get excited, I speak a little bit quicker and people can tell that I'm energized around this point. When I want to be a little bit more deliberate and make sure that people get the point, I will slow down and I will also repeat. I'm quite happy to repeat things. So James L. Jones said, there's nothing harder than having messages in your heart that you cannot share. I'm quite happy to repeat something almost straight after, and I'll do that at a slower pace. The other thing is, when you come into a room, one of the things you need to do is you need to match the energy within the room, within the seminar room, within the conference room. So you need to come in and match the energy of that group. You need to know that, and you can tell by you standing in the wings, or there's been speakers before you, or you've done a little bit of housekeeping, you've spoken to people, or you know your topic is bad news, you're talking about redundancies or layoffs or closing down programs, or it's really good news. If you come in with a really slow and unenergized voice and the group's excited, you will bring the group down. If the group is quite flat at 7 a.m. in the morning and they're not all that energized and you come in rah, 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 jumping up and down, really fast, energized voice, and of course the body language, you can imagine the body language that goes with that. Think of the evangelical American speakers. If you come in too high, you will lose the audience. So your voice and the pace and the energy and the speed at which you talk can help connect with the audience. Match their energy level and add a little bit. And then during the presentation, during the seminar, during the workshop, build your energy by all means, and you will bring them up with you. Come in too high, jump up and down and shout and scream with excitement. If they're not at that energy level, then there'll be this disjoint. Come in too low, too flat, too uninterested, come in like Bernie Fraser perhaps, then you will drag the audience back down. So that's the pace and the speed at which you talk. Don't be afraid to monitor yourself. You can do that via recording, via video recording, smartphones, and just get feedback from someone within the audience. How's my pace? How's my volume? Any questions at this stage? Of course, when you speak too fast, it can be a real issue. When you speak too slow, it can be a real issue. I'm going to pause for a moment. Please type questions straight in or put your hand up and I will open up your microphone. And yes, someone's commented, the other person that's remarkably like Bernie Fraser is the Sandman. I remember watching some of the comedy shows on TV. There's Flacco and the Sandman just deliberately spoke really, really slow, and that was part of his comedy routine. And some of the stand-up comedians, they use the deadpan humour, which is no inflection or variation in their voice whatsoever. So there are times when it is okay to use, I guess, the monotone and the mono speed speaking. Okay. Just checking. No more questions have popped up. No hands up. Okay, thank you for those comments. So I'm going to talk about the use of the pause, and for me, with my relatively uninteresting voice, it's perhaps the pause that's had the greatest impact on my ability to engage an audience and sound reasonably interesting. And I love this quote by Sir Ralph Wilson, the actor. "The most precious things in a speech are pauses. A pause will fill the void, it will capture attention, it will punctuate, illuminate, and build the tension in a speech." So that is all of the things that the pause will do for you. Really powerful use of the pause. Some other things that the pause can be used for. If you speak too fast, so I've mentioned speaking too fast. And just in repeating the quote from Sir Ralph Richardson, "The most precious things in a speech are pauses. A pause will fill the void, capture attention, it will punctuate, illuminate, and build the tension in a speech." So someone asked me if I could repeat that. So thanks, Genevieve. The power of the pause, really very powerful. So if you do speak too fast, the pause is the instrument to bring your pace of speaking down. Speech pathologists will tell you you've been speaking at the rate of which you speak for so long, you cannot all of a sudden become a slower speaker. However, what you can do if you are known as quite a fast speaker, what you can do is you can increase the frequency of the pause. That means say less words before you take a pause. The second thing you can do is every now and then increase the duration of the pause. So have a long pause. Someone who uses the pause very effectively and speaks quite quickly is Barack Obama, the President of the United States. He is a rapid speaker, but he uses pause so effectively that most people don't recognize the rate of which he verbally speaks and says the words. He uses pause to punctuate and illuminate, and he does create suspense, but he also uses pause to give the audience time to digest and take in what he has said. If you think of the raining, and those of you who are in Perth, we've had a lot of rain lately. And of course, Queensland also gets a lot of rain. What happens when it rains too heavily? And think of as a speaker, think of your information as raindrops. So the audience is sitting there, they're the earth, they're Mother Earth, and you are up above speaking to them, sending out raindrops. What happens when it rains too heavily? It floods. The water, the message just runs off because you've been bombarded. So don't let it rain too heavily. Pauses, or pause to allow time for the audience to soak up your raindrops. That's the first reason pauses are so valuable. The brain drop analogy, I hope that works for you. The second thing is when your mind goes blank. For myself, I'm over 50, well on the way to 60. My mind is not as good as it used to be, and I find myself standing up for audiences, speaking for a 1-hour keynote, for a 7-hour one-day workshop, and I'm running my content relying on my mind. And I'm speaking there, not reading from notes, and every now and then my mind goes blank. What do? I pause. And you know, when I pause, nobody knows that my mind's gone blank. Nobody knows. So here's a tip. When your mind goes blank, recognize that the audience does not know what you were going to say next. They have no idea until you say, oh, I've just forgotten what I was going to say. What was I going to say next? Oh, I've just had a mind blank. I've just had a brain freeze. I've just had a senior's moment. If you don't mention that and you trust yourself and allow the pause, the silence, 99% of the time, you will recover. And 80% of the time, if you just wait, and you can pause for about 15 seconds, which seems like a monumental abyss of silence for you as the speaker in front of the audience, but from the audience's perspective, all they noticed is that you paused. So 80% of the time I will pause, and what I was going to say will come back. And the other 20%, that idea, that quote, that story I was going to share has gone. But I can just move on and say something else, move on to the next point, move on to the next story. And because I've used pause rather than, I guess, the panic and the knee-jerk reaction, oh, sorry, I've just lost my way, and the audience does not know. So trust yourself and use the pause. Another time to use the pause, if you get a little nervous and you need to deep breathe. One of the things I taught in last fortnight's webinar about your body language is you can put one hand on your belly button. It's a good resting position. The other hand can gesture. Both hands can gesture, but periodically bring that hand back to your belly button. When you're breathing in deep, the hand should rise out like a balloon blowing out. And then when you breathe in, so you're taking a big breath in, the hand should rise out like the balloon being inflated, and when you breathe out, the hand should move back in. If you're a little bit nervous, you're probably not breathing deep down in your diaphragm. You're probably shallow breathing up the top, almost like a pant, and your shoulders are going up and down, and your belly button, your diaphragm is not moving at all. So a pause enables you to do that proper deep breath. And to monitor it, you can do a couple, 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds in. You can do that for 10 or 15 seconds. And that just enables you to pause, grab hold of the nerves. When you're shallow breathing, you're not oxygenating the brain properly. And you're standing before 150 people and you want your brain to be active, alert, sharp, ready to respond, and you've decided to under-oxygenate it. You've decided to prevent the lungs from working properly by becoming nervous and shallow breathing. Why would you do that to yourself? So really knowing that you are doing that deep diaphragmatic, the low breathing, and oxygenating your blood and supplying your brain with oxygen properly, that's a really good tool, and the pause will help you do that. Now, I'm not sure if you ever have any speakers that use quite a few, filler words, and for some of us, it can get quite distracting, and some of the words actually really don't actually mean much at all, and they just actually keep punctuating our speech to actually sound like we sound important, but actually the word actually doesn't mean anything at all actually. Obviously, you know what I mean, If you've got those filler words, replace them with the pause. It makes you sound so much more confident, so much more competent, and so much more intelligent. If someone asks me, what do I think is the number one concern for people before public speaking, and my response was, well, I think the number one concern is nerves. Yeah, nerves are really quite a problem, and a lot of people don't speak as often as they should because of nerves. Versus the number one problem in public speaking is in fact nerves, and a lot of people are so affected by the nerves that they don't do the amount of public speaking they should. I've said the same response twice. Which one to you out there listening sounded more confident, more competent, and more intelligent? Your filler words, the ums and ahs, actuallys, you knows, obviously, you're trying to buy yourself a little bit of time. The pause does the same thing for you. Use your pause. As Sir Ralph Richardson said, I think it's the most powerful thing in public speaking, in your voice, the power of the pause. Absolutely amazing. And it does add a little bit of vocal variety to me. Okay, thanks. I have a question from Rob, and Rob's asked, are catchphrases such as going forward or moving forward at the end of the day, etc., serving a similar function as fillers? Not really. So our previous Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, in not the current election but the previous election, one of the catchphrases they had was moving forward, moving Australia forward, going forward. And 2 weeks into that 4 or 5 week election campaign, they had to pull those adverts down and they had to change their key message because moving forward was just a catch cry and it didn't really mean anything. So it had no impact, and the Australian public's reaction to it was, this is rubbish. Now, 4 or 5 years ago, Barack Obama did the same thing in a 45-minute speech, and his catch cry was, yes, we can. We're in the middle of a global economic crisis, and many of you will lose your houses, but this is the United States of America, and yes, we can come through this. The health system in the United States is so bad that some of you out there cannot expect to get basic health care, and this is one of United States shames, and yes, we can get through this. So you can use the repetition of your catch cries or your core messages to make your message stick. They're not so much filler words. The other thing with our politicians, if any of you have ever done media training, you'll recognise that they're taught, our politicians are trained by the media to make sure they give these 12-second grabs. So they might do a 30-minute interview, and on the ABC News or the radio, in the news hour, they're going to get 12 seconds of what they've said played back. And you've spoken for half an hour, you've answered questions. How do you make sure that your core message, what you want the audience to take away, how do you make sure that the radio plays that or the television shows that grab, that 12-second grab? You keep saying the same thing over and over again. And they ask you a question about something else and you ignore the question and you keep saying the same thing over and over again. So media training is a little bit different, and they will come out with their grabs, their catch cries, their moving forward, their yes we can. So that is not really filler words. It's those words that don't mean anything. My son, 23, group of his friends around, and like you should have been there, like it was really brilliant, and like, guys, like, this word just has no context in what they're saying, but it is just ubiquitous in their language. So great question, Rob. And media training is a little bit different. The clever politicians, of course, what they do is they answer the question very briefly. They give it a brushstroke answer and then move back to their core message. So that the media, the radio, have lots of grabs that they can use in their news hours that reflect what the politician wanted to say. Okay. Power of the pause. Silence, pause, same thing, really powerful. A lot of the stuff I do comes from Michael Grinder, and some of you know I spent a week with Michael Grinder in Portland in the United States earlier this year. And the pause and the silence is a really powerful thing in your group dynamics. And I'm just going to pause because I have a question. How do you overcome the like? So Genevieve, do you mean you as a speaker? So if you're using like all the time, pause. Get someone in a room that's safe to, every time you say the word that you're trying to eliminate, get them to put your finger up. So in some of my small workshops, the people that do and every time they say it, I get the rest of the audience to put their hand up, to put their finger up. And boy, that really grabs at them and nags them. So yeah, if you've got a friend that's driving you crazy that uses like, then, and you've pointed it out to them, so Genevieve, you've mentioned it to them and they still haven't changed, then start pointing it out, and when you're in a group setting, get a few people at a meeting, say like, or put your hand up, or do some visual cue that lets them know that they've said this word. That is if they want to eliminate like. It could be that they don't give a damn. I don't think my son cares. He does present at university, and I don't think he uses likes at university. It's only in his general conversation. If it's a problem to them, then you can help them. If it's a problem to you, maybe, yeah, you just have to wear it. So, however, you could point out to them that their use of the like is lessening their credibility, their competence, and their intelligence from the audience's perspective. So in everyday chat, that doesn't matter, but if this is how they communicate in the meeting, in the boardroom, at the job interview, then whether they like it or not, it's having a negative impact on how they're being perceived. So silence helps group form. So you're a presenter. You're in front of a group of people. The more comfortable you are with silence, the quicker the group will form. So don't be afraid to use silence. I'm going to read something from Michael Grinder. This is the first time that I have read anything from Michael Grinder, the first time I've read anything over a webinar. So I don't normally read, I don't normally use notes, but I'm going to read this. So silence is a way of bonding a group together. To understand how silence impacts on people, think of a time when you were meeting someone for the first time. Maybe you were on a date or meeting another couple for dinner in an unformed group, i.e. you don't know each other, so the group's unformed. In an unformed group, silence is dreaded. However, in a formed group, silence is comfortable. We're quite happy if someone doesn't speak, if there is that silence. In an unformed group, people feel they need to fill the void with spoken words. In a formed group, silence is comfortable. In fact, it's even valued. Silence is one way that I know my wife, Gail, is my best friend. We can sit next to each other and we can talk, or we can be silent. That's a formed group. The person in charge of an unformed group, so that's you, the presenter, can assist the progress in becoming a formed group by intentionally opening your presentation with frequent pauses and moments of silence that are longer than normal. So when you're opening a group, you're presenting to a group of people, not maybe your work colleagues, but a community group. Open with lots of pauses and some silence that are longer than normal. These mini silences are a major contributor to others feeling accepted. During the silence, the lower and more comfortably that you breathe, so this is the low breathing, so the more silence and the more comfortable you are with low breathing, the more people feel accepted. The sooner people feel accepted, the faster they bond together. So don't be afraid to use silence. Silence shows that you're comfortable. Silence helps the group accept the silence. They don't feel the need to chatter and move on, and then you're moving that group from an unformed dysfunctional group to a formed, on the same page group. And sometimes you will have people that come to your seminars with different points of view, opposing points of view, and they'll come to hear from you for different reasons. The sooner you can find that common ground or a common thread and get the group formed, the sooner you can move on to the lessons, the take-home messages that you want to leave them with. Use your silence. Also shows that you're comfortable in front of that audience. You're not panicking. You're not speaking just for the sake of speaking. I encourage you, the next time you get before an audience, just do some pauses that are twice as long as you normally do. In fact, start to feel uncomfortable with the length of silence, and then have someone in the room, a colleague or a friend or someone you met earlier on, and then have a chat with them at the end of your seminar. How did those pauses go? And just get the feedback from the group as to how effective those pauses were. The broken sentence, not the broken record. I couldn't find a broken sentence as an image, so I had to put up a broken record. You've heard of the broken record technique where you just keep saying the same thing. The broken sentence is a way of bringing the audience back. And what you say, it normally takes about 3 or 4 passages where each passage you add a little bit more to the sentence. But each bit of the sentence in its own right does not make sense. Now if you're almost ready to come back, I'd like to move on. Each passage will bring a few more people back. If I say to you, now if you're almost ready, could you come back because I'd like to move on, you will hear me, you will understand me, and you will ignore me. So this is when you've got the group doing an activity. So turn to the person next to you and have a chat about how this might impact you. Or you've got some people brainstorming on different tables around the room, and as the facilitator or the trainer, you want to bring them back. Using the broken sentence will grab the attention of them, and each time you'll bring a few more people back. I think Peter said something, but it didn't make sense. I better pay attention. If you can throw that broken sentence in with a visual cue, like putting your hand in the air or the palms up with a beckon towards, so some of the audience will get the visual cue and some of them will also hear the broken sentence. The two together will bring an audience back very quickly. Generally, use the start high, the loud, and then soften. Now if you're almost ready to come back, can I have your attention at the front? Just one of the tools where you can use your voice to really almost manipulate the audience. Another way that I've heard this described by a very brilliant Perth speaker named Glenn Capelli. Glenn Capelli calls it the boomerang technique. So every time you throw out the boomerang, you bring back, and the boomerang returns to you, you bring back a few more people. But it's the broken sentence that you throw out, not a complete sentence. Otherwise, you'll be repeating the same sentence. Can I have everyone back to the front? Can I have everyone back to the front? And they're going to hear you and ignore you. And then as you get louder, the noise in the room is going to get louder as well as they are immersed in their conversation. So if everyone can now come back to the center, what I want to talk about now, and in fact start moving on, start delivering content that they're now missing out on because they're still talking. The whisper will bring them back. And then of course you can go back and repeat in your normal voice the material that they've just missed out on. So a couple of ways of helping you bring the audience back, as opposed to the ding, 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 ding on the glass, clapping, hey, can everyone come back, all the different times you've seen people struggle to bring the audience back. It's the broken sentence. It works. It is really quite amazing. And if you do the visual cue, it even becomes more effective. And don't be afraid to set in your introductory remarks, let people know how you're going to manage the group. So when I want you back, I'm going to put my hand up. Those of you who see my hand, can you stop speaking and can you look towards me? And then if you're doing one-on-one speaking, so they're having a chat to each other, some of us are absolutely compliant. I certainly are. I will do what I'm told. And when I see the guy's hand, I'm going to stop speaking. So if you're speaking to me, then that's tough because I'm doing what I was told to do. I'm now going to stop talking and stop listening to you, and I'm going to look at the person at the front. Do that visual cue with the boomerang broken sentence, great impact. I'm going to pause for a moment. Throw those questions at me. A credible voice or an approachable voice. Those of you who've flown recently, you may have heard the captain speaking, and the captain may be a female captain as well, so this is not dependent on gender. This is your captain speaking. We'll be flying at 36,000 feet. We have a flying time of about 4.5 hours, and I will get back to you when we're closer to our destination with more news. Then the cabin crew comes on. This is your cabin crew speaking. We're here to be of assistance to you, and we want to make this flight as safe and as enjoyable as possible for you. So please do not hesitate to contact us if we can be of any assistance during the flight. The captain is sending you information. He is telling you. He's not negotiating with you. He's not asking you whether you want to fly at 32,000 feet or whether you want the flying time at a different height or at a different time. He's sending information. So that is the credibility. The cabin crew are approachable. So they're quite happy to take your questions, to respond to you. The difference in the voice is that when you are credible, your voice needs to be steady and strong and with a downward turn at the end of each sentence. So after you finish each sentence, just put your chin down a little bit and you will get that inflection down. That is a great credible voice. I've got a couple of questions that I will come back to shortly. The cabin crew, their head bobs up and down and they've got this rise and fall in their voice. Most Australians speak with this intonation that rises up and falls. Australians are very approachable people. We sometimes lack credibility on the world stage. Some of the most credible speakers are the Germans because they have that very steady, that guttural voice and the intonation, the tip down at the end. So when you want to be credible, use the captain's voice with very little rise and fall, a steady voice and a downturn at the end of each sentence. But when you want to be approachable, get that voice rising and falling, the intonation. The next slide, I'll show you a little bit more about this. The question was, how do you deal with multiple conversations going on in the same room where attention is now away from the key speaker and others start discussing their own agenda? I find that frustrating and often stop talking and say that they may want to share what they are discussing. I guess if that's happening, for me as a speaker, there's two things that I would do. Number one, I would set the rules up front and let them know that when I want you back, so we're going to break into groups and you're going to do lots of discussions. There's going to be different points of view and you're going to be really deep in the discussion. I've only got a limited time, so I want to keep it short and sharp. When I want you back, I'm going to put my hand up and I'll also call you back. So please come back straight away. That is the first thing that I'd do. The second thing that I do is I would try and use the broken sentence. And I would then also, I would move on to the content. So those that are paying attention, I'd go to the whiteboard, I'd go visual and I'd start writing up a quote or some information and I'd start talking about it and just ignore those that are still chatting away. Those that are really interested will quickly want to pay attention and get the others to keep quiet because you're now into new content and they're going to feel left behind. Now, you can only do this if you've set that as a rule up front. So don't sort of breach their trust or their expectations by using it as a strategy without you letting them know that when I want you back, I'm going to put my hand up, I need you back quickly, and then we're going to move on. Loud voice and then the soft voice. If you keep doing the loud voice, then they'll just raise their volume as well. There was one other thing that came to mind as well, Andrea, that will help bring them back. If they're a really formed group, then sometimes the discussion can be quite good and you can decide whether you want that to happen or not. If the group's not all that well formed, then they're going to have less discussions and you'll then have to promote them into doing more discussions. So you'll have to give them some information to feed them so they can discuss a little bit more because they're not comfortable with each other yet. They're not quite free to open. So what sounds like you've got a really formed group, whether they're functional or dysfunctional, that's another issue. This is quite a complex issue that you've raised, so feel free to email me and I can send you some more information around those multiple discussions and trying to bring them back. A good facilitator will bring them back. If you can't bring them back, it may be that you're not facilitating all that good and you need to strengthen some of those skills and be confident in them. Okay. So this is a slide that summarizes your voice and the body language. I'm not talking about body language. I did that in last webinar. But steady voice is credible. Voice fluctuates with the rise and fall, as the Australian Aussie twang does all the time, is approachable. Intonation deepens at the end of the sentence. Australians, we do that inflection up. At the end of each sentence, we'll just tilt our head up and have that little rise. Very approachable. Your palms facing down for credibility, facing up for approachability. The captain was sending the information. The flight hostess, the flight attendants, they're seeking information. If we can be of any assistance, please do not hesitate to contact us. When do you want to be the captain? And when do you want to be the flight attendants? When do you want to be credible? When do you want to be approachable? This is just a really abbreviated version of what's called the Kolb learning model. At the start of your presentation, you're trying to develop rapport and connect with your audience. You often need to develop that permission. What's in it for me? Why should I be listening to you? So you need that approachable voice. Then when you go into the teaching, these are the 4 steps. Become more credible. Once you've taught the steps, then you're going to guide them. You're going to coach them. You're going to mentor them. You still want to be credible. Use some of your own experiences in that credible voice. Then as you wrap up, and the next steps, where to now? How are you going to use this in your, in your future life? How are you going to use this in your workplace? This information is valuable. Move back to the approachable voice. Start with approachable, move to credible. Some people come on and they say, this is what you've got to do. This is the way you do it. I'm the guru, and they're credible, 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 credible. But hang on a minute, who are you? You haven't taken the time to know who I am. I'm not seeing your connection. You haven't taken the time to build the trust within the audience. You haven't revealed some of your own vulnerability. So start approachable, go credible, continue with credible, and then certainly wrap up with that approachable voice. That's just the standard learning curve. Okay. Approachable and credible. How to look after your voice. I could have put this at the start, but some of you may have thought this was a little bit boring. Please drink fluids. Drink water, and also drink water during the presentation. One of the top speech pathologists, Professor Mark Onslow, in a 1-hour seminar, he brings up 2 glasses of water, and he drinks them both. And that's just a speech pathologist taking care of his voice. When I've been pausing for questions, I've been having a drink of water as well. Opera singers, their voice is important to them. Opera singers drink a raw egg before they sing. I'm not keen on drinking a raw egg, so I will drink pineapple juice. Pineapple juice is a really good lubricant for your vocal apparatus, as is apple juice. Just helps if you've got a quiver, nervousness, or you're doing a long seminar, just helps keep that voice nice and lubricated. Down the bottom corner, I've got the flat white with a red cross. Don't drink milk before you're about to speak, and this includes soya milk. The milk protein will coat your vocal apparatus and has the effect of exacerbating any quiver or any vocal irregularities. So instead, yes, have your flat white at 8 a.m. in the morning if you're speaking at midday or at say 11 a.m. Don't have your flat white in the morning if you're speaking at 8:30. You still need your caffeine, so go the long black or get yourself one of those energy drinks, the V or the Red Bull or the Coca-Cola, if you need the caffeine fix. And then don't be afraid to do your tongue twisters. I mentioned the opera singers, they warm up their voice. Practice your pause. Do ums, not ums, do humming, just to get that voice working before you go on stage. Those of you who ride push bikes or who jog or who work out, you stretch your muscles, you warm up before you do the exercise, warm up your voice. She sells seashells by the seashore. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? We all know our tongue twisters. It's just a matter of getting the voice operating, ready, lubricated before. Use your fluids. Try and avoid the protein, the milk, the soy. Do your tongue twisters. And we've got the Tic Tacs up the top. What are the Tic Tacs for? Some people tell me one of the problems with their voice and one of the things they have to deal with as speakers is a dry mouth. You can put a Tic Tac, you can wedge a Tic Tac between your teeth and the gum and your lip. So you know there's the groove between each tooth in the gum. Just that sits above that groove is the right shape to put a little Tic Tac up there vertically. Push it up with your tongue or your finger and just leave it there. Within 5 minutes you will forget that it's there. Takes about 2 hours to dissolve. So you've now got 2 hours of fresh breath. But also what the Tic Tac does, as does chewing gum, although don't chew chewing gum as a speaker, what the Tic Tac does is it creates or causes you to salivate profusely. So it creates saliva. Saliva does two things. Number one, it lubricates your mouth, no more dry mouth. As opposed to chewing gum, no more dry mouth, but now you've got to speak and try not to spit chewy or whatever. The second thing the Tic Tac does with the saliva, you now have a mouthful of saliva every few minutes. What do? You stop, you pause, and you swallow. So if you speak too fast, you can also use the Tic Tac to lubricate or to reduce the dry mouth and to promote swallowing. Just a little tip. Not sure whether that interests anyone or not, but the Tic Tac works. If it does drop down, that's fine. Just swallow it, just chew it. But it will help with your dry mouth. So how to improve your voice? Here's some tips you can do. Use a microphone. If your voice is shallow, it doesn't reach, use a microphone. Do you know how to use a microphone? It's not an ice cream. You don't eat it. You don't speak into it. As you're speaking, make sure your hand doesn't drop down. I'm not going to teach you how to use a microphone. Practice projecting your voice. So if you do have a soft voice and you want to throw your voice, use the wine glass. Someone standing at the back of the room with a wine glass. Imagine hitting the wine glass with your voice. Use the deep breathing, so the low breathing with the belly button going out as you breathe in, and practice and visualize throwing your voice. When you hit the glass, you will hear that wonderful ring of your own voice coming back. And keep trying. Don't shout, or otherwise you'll strain your vocal apparatus. But over time, and you'll hit the glass. Get the person to take another step back. Then you'll hit the glass again. Get the person to take another step back. So over a while, you can learn to project your voice just with a friend and a wine glass in the back of a room, gradually moving back. So use a microphone if you need to. Practice projecting your voice, acting, or go to elocution classes. I know a lot of really good speakers that spent considerable time learning how to act, both for stagecraft, so they can be comfortable on the stage and they know how to move, but also for their voice. And around Perth, around Australia, there are voice coaches that will work with people who sing and who act, and some speech pathologists also specialise in voice coaching. So do make use of resources if you want to increase the quality, not just the volume, so it's not just projecting, but the quality, the intonation of your voice. Please type away with the questions. I'm just going to end as you're typing in any questions. Most of you know I run workshops, webinars, and I do one-on-one coaching. I also do in-house workshops. If you have any need within your organisation, I can design a half-day or a full-day workshop. Most of this stuff, and I haven't listed it on this webinar, is in my website. So if you go to my website at my name, www.peterdew.com, you will notice that there's a whole range of things. On events, I'll just go there now. On the events page, you will see a whole host of it's come up, a whole host of events that are coming up. There will be some further events in November. Webinars, this is where you go to register for the free webinars. You will notice that I've run the 2 September webinars. I've got a couple of webinars scheduled for June, for November. I just have not put them on my website as yet. So please do make use of me after this webinar, and if I can be of any assistance, please let me know. It has gone 11 o'clock. Thank you for your participation. Thanks, Rob. Glad you enjoyed the gems and you said wisdom. I'm not sure how wise I am, but always pleasure to be of assistance. Email me if I've glossed over something. I remember there was that one question that I really struggled with. Give me an email and I'll find out a little bit more with that disruptive group. And I'm going to end the webinar there.